TNCradio.live, your commercial driver navigation station.
Reverse Gears moved to Thursdays at 8, 7 Central on the Travel Network channel, TNCradio.live. You're invited to ride through the stories of and music that made the memory makers we call the soundtrack of life at our new time, 8, 7 Central, Thursdays on TNCradio.live. It's Landline Now, followed by Steve Summers' Overnight Drive every night on TNCradio.live starting at 11 p.m. Eastern and 10 p.m. Central. You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCradio.live, where James Rogers, Jamie Irvine, and Tom Kelly provide owner-operators of commercial trucks with expert advice about starting, operating, and growing a professional trucking fleet. It's time to mind your trucking business.
And welcome in. Thank you all for joining us tonight. TNCradio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly. I'm here with Jamie Irvin.
Hello.
James Rogers.
Hello, hello.
Jamie, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for asking. How about you? I just got back from some holidays. Are you all rested up, or did you have to come back to work to get a break?
Oh, man, I'm telling you. The one good thing I did on this was I came back on a Friday so I could have the weekend to kind of recover.
Yeah.
It's been running the whole time since then. So you must be punished when you go on vacation. You know how that goes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And James, how are you doing, sir?
I've been out on the road for the last week and a half or so and just getting around to getting back home. But it's kind of like you. It's like you come home and expect a rest, but there's there's no rest for the weary, I guess, as they say.
That's the truth. Guys, we've got stuff going on all over the place this week. Breaking news. Jamie, you were just sharing this with us. Tell us what you see going on out there today.
So we are recording this on July 28th, and we got breaking news this morning that Land Air, a trucking firm out of Vermont, closed earlier this month and has now filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, meaning it will not be reorganized. It's going to be liquidated. The company had $3 million in assets. Now, James, we figured out exactly how many units they had and how many drivers. Can you just share that with us?
Yeah, according to the SaferWeb snapshot, it comes out to 1,598 power units as of February on their MCS 150 and 1,730 drivers.
Yeah, and so they racked up $43 million in debts, and it looks like only 2 creditors have secured claims. So the Bank of California for $5 million and the private equity firm that backed them, Corbel Capital Partners, for nearly $34 million. So there's a lesson in this. One, just because you scale and get big doesn't mean you're financially viable. If you don't follow the basic fundamentals, even a very sophisticated company like this can get themselves into trouble really quick. And 2, if you're a smaller organization working with a larger company like this, you are exposed. And that's where we kind of wanted to focus the conversation today, because that's who our audience is people who are trying to get from driver to running their own independent fleet. So there's in the court documents, there's a list of unsecured debts that are not going to be paid, and there's a whole list of companies here, everything from Foley Brothers to McKay Towing and Recovery out of Lundberg. These people are not getting paid, and that's the risk that you run when you work with a larger organization. If they go down, it can be devastating for your small business.
I mean, it's a shock. I mean, Land Air is huge. You see their equipment everywhere. And they do. I mean, their primary business was working in the expedite and kind of LTL industry. And the other part that's kind of got me shocked is they were instrumental during COVID at the request of the president and them. They were one of the major people that were moving stuff around. So this really shows something. I mean, obviously they overextended themselves. The market changed, and here they are.
And to me, it's a real reminder of how important it is to really make sure that your business is as strong as it possibly can be, because it's not if tough times come. It's just a matter of when. If you've been in business any length of time, you've seen the cycles. This is not a new company. This company was founded in 1968 as Allied Air Freight. That was Fred, the father. His boys, Thomas and William Spencer, took over operations. And this is a legacy company with a big footprint. And this is going to impact a lot of people.
Oh, huge. I mean, legacy isn't a word. I know I've been doing this a long time, and I mean, wow. It's speechless. It is. Yeah. July 14th in Massachusetts. Yep. They filed federal bankruptcy.
Well,
Yeah.
sadly, guys, I've been through this and got the T-shirt because I had one of my former companies had about $350,000 in outstanding debt with a little company called Enron.
There you go.
Out of that, we got less than $20,000.
Okay. I do want to make a correction if you guys don't mind. I just
Sure.
looked it up and dug into it a little bit more. I'm sorry. It was a different Landair. The Landair we're speaking of had 135 drivers, 450 employees. So,
Yeah, that sounds more in line with $3 million
Yeah,
in
so-
assets.
well, I mean, what that tells me is that, I mean, if they had 3 million asset and they were 44.4 million in debt, they were definitely over leveraged. That's huge over leverage.
It is, and so if, James, a company like yours with 8 units, that even though this one is smaller than we originally reported, it is still a large company in comparison to yours, and it just shows
It
you
is.
that there's steps and levels, but the fundamentals hold consistent. If you're leveraged with debt, you're in a very weak position, and when things change, it can change really fast.
Oh, absolutely. Because it shows me and it reaffirms, because every quarter I sit down with my accountant and my CPA and tax attorney and stuff. And we have a discussion and we look at my books, right? We look at my company's books, and the profit margins in this industry are already razor thin. I mean, if you're getting 3% at the end of a quarter, at the end of the year, that's considered good, where other industries look at, a profit margin of, higher than that, anywhere 10%. Some I've heard, Amazon, they had a huge one over the last couple of years. But this industry, it's so volatile, and razor thin, that you have got to be very, very careful not to over leverage in situations like this, because it's like you said, it's not when, it's not if it's going to happen. It's when is it going to happen? The market changes. The trucking industry is probably one of the most volatile industries in this country, and this is a prime example.
And here's the thing is, if you're a business owner and you're doing business with a larger company like this, you've got to think about mitigating the risk. You have to look at that, and you have to really make sure that you are in a position where you're not over leveraged. So if by chance you weren't able to collect, it wouldn't put you under. But I also think of the people who work for a larger company like this. Like, sometimes there's this idea that there's more security as working as an employee. But just listen to one of the employees and what he said. He said, "We've all been laid off. We're done. I don't know what happened. We came in the day after the 4th of July and started to lay people off. As soon as they said, don't pick up any freight, I knew it was all over." And this is where, 450 families, they're not having a good summer anymore.
Wow, that's just scary. And, and anybody could have been in that position at any point.
Yeah. And let me read you another quote. This is from another employee. He said this in an email. "I just don't understand, because we were not hurting for business or customers. There were times we just couldn't keep up. So I know it wasn't for lack of business."
So-
And the words that they were using, some of the employees, shocked. This is a messy and confusing situation. I just don't understand how this happened.
Yeah, and it can happen. I mean, and that's the same way, the Enron employees were. That you see this a lot of times. It's not just poor management. It's something was terribly wrong at the top, like we saw in the Enron situation, where they were doing, stuff. And I'm not saying that's the situation here. I'm saying that in the past we've seen it. Look, at the end of the day, it's poor management. Whether they were doing something nefarious or not doesn't really matter. But, they made some bad decisions. And
Well, they made choices to leverage the assets. When you look at how much money they owed, then they were leveraging the assets. And what I believe probably happened is, as the money wasn't so cheap, some of the debt got called back, and they couldn't pay it because they didn't have sufficient cash reserves to be able to offset that, because they were leveraging the equipment. And so it's like, what do? Go sell a bunch of used equipment right now? I mean, even at the price it's at, it's probably not what you paid for it. So they were if I had to guess, I would say that was probably the trigger of the demise of this company, is some of their debt got called back and they couldn't cover it.
I think you're right.
And that's what private equity companies do. So, you got to definitely think about that. If you're a mid-sized privately held company who's thinking about using a PE or investment firm, you need to really think through, because what those companies do is they leverage debt. They don't necessarily, and they take cash flow out of your business, and that can put you behind the eight ball. And once the dominoes start to fall, there's nothing you can do to stop it. And now we have a legacy trucking company that was built from the ground up from 1968 that is going to be wiped off the face of the earth. That's sad.
Yeah, I tell you what, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll talk more about this and some other happenings, breaking news going on in the world of the trucking industry. We'll be back here in just a couple of minutes. Stay right there.
You're listening to TNCRadio.live. Remember to tune in to the Truckers Network radio show with Shelley Johnson weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern.
At Hot Shot Secret, we share the science behind common diesel problems. For example,
diesel fuel cetane levels.
The cetane rating in diesel fuel is 42 to 45. Most diesel engines operate more efficiently with a cetane rating of 48 to 50. One treatment of Hot Shot Secret Diesel Extreme will raise your cetane 7 points, increase fuel economy, and improve cold starts.
Hot Shot Secret Diesel Extreme is available nationwide at truck stops, fine farm and auto stores, and online at hotshotsecret.com. Hot Shot Secret, powered by science.
Hope Savara here. Tune in every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on TNCRadio.live for my new show, The Driver Life Podcast. From your feet to the food you eat, from cellular health to how your cell phone affects your health, from how you move to improving your sleep. I believe it's the small, simple changes that lead to the big results in your life so that you can feel good again. We cover it all here on the Driver Life Podcast. Just every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern on TNCRadio.live.
You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live. My name is Jamie Irvin. I'm with Tom Kelly. Hey, Tom.
Hello, Jamie.
And we're with James Rogers. James, you're hard at work right now?
I am. I'm trying not to blow y'all's ears out with beeping and everything else.
Hey, that's the life of being in the trucking business. So we started off our show today talking about the breaking news about Land Air. Quite a shock. Legacy company, 1968 was founded, out of business permanently. All assets will be liquidated, and a lot of exposure for a lot of different people who are going to not be able to collect very much money at all. So in other news, though, Tom, there's some things happening at the port, and we had reported on that previously, that we knew there was some protests and things happening in California. Why don't you give us a lowdown, Tom, of what's happening out in California at the ports?
Yeah, what they're now calling the gig economy law, which we know as AB5. We talked a lot about this the last couple of weeks. Obviously, drivers are very unhappy, and they've been trying to make it known what their displeasure is. They are begging, hoping for, however you want to put it, that the governor will meet with them and hear their concerns. And so they have, at least for the moment, they have agreed to quit blocking the port of Oakland and to allow business to return back to normal. But, guys, this isn't over. by a long shot. They're still going to argue about all of this. However, I don't really think the governor cares. That's my personal opinion. Okay, I think at this point, those who have the power are going to hold on to the power, and it's kind of like, yeah, we're sorry you're upset. Move on.
So I was gonna say, I kind of think of it as a different deal. A different opinion is with everything that's going on and the initial impacts that it's having, there's still obviously more to come. I think that for some reason I have always, and this came from the military, is that when you hear words have meanings, and when I hear that they're now calling it the gig economy laws, part of me wants to say, okay, that they realize what they did. There's going to be a change somewhere. Going to be. Whether or not they actually do it, that's another thing. It's just, a personal opinion.
James, I hear what you're saying, and when I hear them change the whole vernacular around this issue and trying to reframe it as the gig economy law, there's a fundamental shift going on here. And I hear this all the time. I hear people say, especially on the parts side of the business, the repair side of the business, I hear my clients and they say, people just don't want to work. They just don't want to work like they used to. And I can't find anybody. But, I did some research on that, and I found news articles all the way back to the 1890s with headlines that said, people just don't want to work like they used to. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. You go back, you think of the Great Depression, right? Everybody would have been desperate for a job. There are news articles during the Great Depression in the 1920s and, where they're saying, or I guess it would have been the 1930s, and they're saying, we can't find enough people to work in the harvest, and we're going to have a shortage of food because of that. You go back to the 1890s, and there's complaints about them not being able to mobilize labor effectively enough. I don't think people understand how seismic of a shift the technology that has allowed the rise of the gig economy to actually be. Now, it's having a big impact on the trucking industry, but I believe that there is a lot more going on here that has the federal and state governments very, very concerned, because the old model of how people go to work, that industrial revolution model, right? Where we leave the farms, we come to the cities, we go to an office, or we go to a warehouse, or we go to a manufacturing facility, we put in our 8, 10, 12 hours, and then we go home. This is not the reality for people that are coming into the workforce now. And young people are saying, I don't want your crap job where I got to, slave. I'm going to work from home on the internet, and that's a much preferable path for me. So I'm with you, James. I think there's more to this. And I think the fact that they've renamed this the gig economy law speaks to the fact that there's bigger issues here that they're trying to address. The trucking industry seems to be just caught in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're in military terms, we're nothing but a innocent casualty. We're a casualty of the war going on. So, and I'm with Tom on part of it. The powers that be, they're going to have a decision to make, and I don't know. I just get a gut feeling that they're going to make a change. They realize the impact that it has had, and it's going to affect the greater part of it. So. We'll see.
Tom, could you explain to us some of the strong language that they've been using around something about a heart attack economy or something? I just thought that was very interesting.
Well, that's really more about the railroad stuff. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But I don't think it's significantly different here in that I do believe that if AB 5 goes into effect and people really do quit moving freight in California because of it, it will, as we're going to hear in a little bit in relation to the railroad, it will be like a heart attack on the economy. And this economy is already on life support.
Yeah, and if you think about inflation, like we know it's red hot. The feds keep raising the interest rates. The the main, just go back to your basic economics 101, right? Supply and demand. As long as the demand outpaces supply, inflation will continue to be red hot. And the trucking industry plays a huge role in that, because if you can't get the goods on the shelves fast enough, then demand continues to outstrip supply and inflation continues to go up. So you do something to severely limit the trucking industry's ability to move freight, and that's going to have a crippling effect on the economy.
Exactly.
Agreed.
And I don't see, at this point, I'm not hearing any of the words other than the inaction so far to implement all of this. I don't hear any of the leaders saying the right words that are giving me any hope that this is going to turn out okay.
The only thing that might happen, and let's see what we can do to advocate for this, is that, and we talked about this in a previous show, where there were laws in place that made the trucking industry exempt from laws like this, and they're removing that. They're saying no, the trucking industry shouldn't be exempt, and hopefully we can advocate that it should be. The trucking industry needs a set of legislation and laws that fit the trucking industry. I get what they're trying to do with Uber and with people who work as contractors and working from home, and the shift to the gig economy and how it's so disruptive. I get they're trying to mitigate that, but you cannot take this one law and apply it equally to all industries. So maybe they won't change the law, but maybe we could get an exemption. And we need individuals to talk to the representatives and advocate for that. And we need special interest groups to also back us on that. And I don't know that we have that support.
Well, that's one of the problems. I haven't heard, usually one of the bigger people that jumps on board is the ATA, one side of the fence with the other, and then, or OOIDA. I really have not heard a lot out of either one of them as a result of it, even as a result of the decision.
Yeah, no, OOIDA filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court prior to the decision, and since then have made it quite clear that they are very disappointed in the decision that the court has made. But they are, like a lot of us, kind of in a wait and see. Okay, almost, and this is the part that nobody quite understands. The bluff has been called.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, we've called your hand. What are you going to do about this, California? And so far, nobody's saying anything. I don't know how to take that. I take it as, for me, and I'm generally an optimistic person, but I'm taking this as bad news. I don't think it's because they've had any kind of change of heart or any kind of wisdom has come their way. I think it's just a matter of they're getting their ducks in a row so that when they drop the bomb here, there's nothing anybody can do about it. That's
and the ATA, the American Trucking Association, that's the national trucking association. They're looking at things from a national perspective. They've allowed the California Trucking Association, which is of course a member of ATA, to lead the charge because, hey, this is a California issue. And the California Trucking Association failed to get the Supreme Court to hear their appeal. So I believe that it would, it makes sense to me that ATA is just being quiet on this right now, because the last thing they want is this to become not just a California issue, but to become a federal issue or a national issue, I should say.
Right.
Well, I think it already is in many ways.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you got New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Jersey that are just chomping at the bit to get back in session to put their own forms of the bill in law. And then, of course, you got Illinois, who has quickly jumped onto that bandwagon as well. So
the hits keep coming, gentlemen. The hits keep coming. We've seen, a major fleet go bankrupt. We see the possibility of the trucking industry being crippled by laws like AB5, but it's not just that we have to talk about. We've also still got to talk about the rail issue and how that all connects to the transportation industry. So we're going to take a quick break. When we're back, we're going to talk about that, let you know what's going on there. And we'll, sorry guys, I screwed that up.
Keep going.
So we're going to talk about all of that when we get back from our break.
It's Landline Now, followed by Steve Summers' Overnight Drive every night on TNCRadio.live starting at 11 p.m. Eastern and 10 p.m. Central.
Front Lane introduces Impulse, the world's first collision alert system for the driver behind you when you have to brake hard. Impulse uses ultra-bright pulsing red LEDs to alert drivers behind you who might not be giving their full attention to the road. Using amazing accelerometer technology and a battery that will last for years, Impulse installs in minutes, fits nearly any vehicle, and never requires additional wiring. Drivers react 50% faster, helping to protect you and your passengers. Learn more by visiting www.frontlane.com/impulse. That's www.frontlane.com/impulse. Approved by all 50 states. Impulse by Front Lane.
I'm Hope Savara. Join us on TNCRadio.live at 7 p.m. Eastern with Building Strong Minds with your host, Dr. Christopher Cortman.
Catch Landline Now every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, along with an encore presentation weekdays at noon, right here on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Thank you very much, Ron. And we are back with our conversation about some of the breaking news going on in the transportation industry. I am Jamie Irvin. I'm with Tom Kelly. Tom, how's it going?
Going well.
And we're with James Rogers, who's out working today. James, how's it going out there on the road?
I'm keeping it between the lines. That's about all I can say right now.
Yeah, you keep it shiny side up, my friend. Okay, so we've already talked about the breaking news around Landair filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy. We've talked about what's going on with the renaming of AB5 to the gig economy law out in California. There's another big thing going on in the news right now that affects the transportation industry. Tom, what's going on in the rail sector?
Well, I tell you, this is really kind of scary. And there was a vote that was taken by, and let me make sure that I'm going to say this right because it's important to get these kinds of names correct. There was a vote taken a week or two ago by the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. Okay, so they voted. I don't know what the last date of the vote was. They voted to go on strike. Okay, and we'll talk in a minute about why that is. But they're frustrated. And they want to go on strike, and so let's just stop there for a second. Imagine, if you would, if railroads shut down in America, even for a few days. Now, you talk about giving the economy a heart attack. Could you imagine if there was no railroad at all? I'm talking Amtrak, a lot of commuter trains, and of course freight movement throughout the U.S. Imagine if all of that shut down. What do you think would happen to the trucking industry, James?
It would extremely get overwhelmed. There's no way we have enough capacity to move it. We just don't. Obviously, the first thing you'd probably see is, the cost of freight would absolutely increase. I don't know where it would stop at, because everybody would want to get their freight on somebody's truck. So they're going to pay whatever it takes. At the end of the day, that's going to drive up the cost even further for, with the inflationary rules, and at the end result for the consumer, it would just make things even worse. There's absolutely no way that this country or the trucking industry could take that load on. No way.
On any given day, this may be a shock to some people, on any given day, the railroads account for 28% of the total U.S. freight moved in any given day. 28%.
1.7 trillion ton miles of freight. Ooh. as of 2018, the last report.
So imagine that. like you said, James, there's no way to pick it up. And then you put on top of that, we're having issues with, how we're going to do labor in California. We've got the highest diesel prices we've seen in decades. We have inflation going on. Now, I'm a small government guy. I don't like the government getting involved in things. To me, the best government is a quiet government that does, as little as possible. You maintain the national defense and secure our borders and make sure that we're able to have commerce between the states. So this is where the government fits in. Can we allow the railroads to just shut down? The Biden administration says no. They've brought in arbitrators. They're trying to come up with a new contract to make everybody happy again. And I guess they need to, as much as I hate to say it, because I don't like government getting involved, especially in these kinds of affairs. But we also can't afford at this point in the history of the United States to just shut down rail. We just can't do it.
No, and I agree. And I think what drove them, which I agree, this is probably the first thing I agree with this administration doing. And the biggest part of that, I think that they did it was because of the cost of fuel, gasoline, diesel, and all that. Because how is the majority of that transported outside of a pipeline? It's on rails. Some of the hugest, pilot, for instance, the majority of pilots of gasoline and diesel fuel are transported via rail. If you can't get it moved, that's going to be one of the biggest impacts of it's already hurt.
Well, and I look at it from the overall, economic perspective. We are in a situation that we really haven't been in 40 years. And if we have additional disruptions, then we run the risk of going over, really like going over the edge. And it could take a decade to bring it back online and get back to where we were. So from the Fed's perspective, they can't let that happen. What would they have to do, though, to mobilize the National Guard to take action? Now, James, you're a veteran. You have a little bit of insight into what is required. Could you review that with us?
Well, there's two actions. Well, number one, the president cannot control the state's National Guard at any level unless there's two actions that are performed. One, he would have to reenact the Defense Production Act. That's the first step, which he has the power and the ability to do that. The other thing he would have to do is, in order to take control of each state's National Guard, as well as use federal troops, active duty military within this country's borders, he'd have to declare martial law. And then, and when those two things happen, then he is free to use this country's active duty military in any capacity he wishes.
So, Tom, is that a possibility?
It's the government, the president, for the last 5 or 6 presidents, so this is not a Republican Democrat thing, each one is taking the power of the executive order one level further than the guy before him, and taking a little bit. So could he write an executive order that temporarily suspends? What do you call the law that that keeps the Army from operating within the United States?
It falls under an amendment, and I'm having a loss of thought.
It's a Latin name, but whatever that law is, could he sign something that says, by executive order, I suspend that only in regards to the railroad, and put the Army in charge of the railroad until the strike is over? Sure, he could try it, and then it would go into action and people would start doing that. And of course, immediately somebody would file with multiple courts, and it would run its way all the way up to the Supreme Court very quickly. But in the meantime, he'd keep the railroad operating until that got worked out. Yeah. But in some ways, these guys are brilliant. Maybe selfish, but brilliant. What better time to demand better working conditions, better pay, and all the other things that go on during these types of negotiations? Because if this had happened 4 years ago, it wouldn't have near the impact that it would have right now.
Agreed.
Yeah, the workers see it, that there's a window of opportunity here to move their agenda forward and to get more. And you can't really fault those individual people for wanting that.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
the danger level is high.
Very high. And there's, I agree that they're very smart, but they're in irony of it. What I find interesting is the fact that unions are very biased when it comes to political parties. They've always traditionally backed, liberal or democratic parties. Well, here we are, where they're basically taking advantage of, their party of choice. They're holding their feet to the fire with the rail union, and then of course it's going to be interesting in the next 30 days or so. It really is.
Well, can I speak just for a moment? So as some of you know, maybe you can hear it in my voice, I'm a Canadian. And earlier this year, my federal government enacted the Emergencies Act, which is formerly known as the War Measures Act, to deal with the trucker convoy protest in our nation's capital. And I can tell you that even just now, recounting it, I get quite emotional, because when I saw the law enforcement agencies and the military moved to take action against the citizens of my country, and I saw a woman knocked down by a war horse and almost stomped to death on live TV. It's a terrible feeling to see those kinds of actions being taken within the borders of your own country. Absolutely. And you realize how precarious the freedoms that we have fought for decades are. None of these things are a given. These things that we have taken for granted for the last couple hundred years, and not necessarily taken for granted, but fought and bled for in previous generations. This can all be taken away from us. And it sounds dramatic, but I saw it happen in my own country, something I never thought I would see. This is stuff you see on film footage from the 1930s and 40s in fascist countries, not here in the Western world.
And I agree. I'll offer a personal experience on the other side of the perspective as a soldier that was in that situation when Katrina happened here in the States. At the time, I was with the 82nd, and we were sent down to that area, and and martial law was enacted, and it's very hard on our part to actually perform the duties that we're directed to do. I mean, at the end of the day, I've told people before, at the end of the day, the military is going to do what the military is directed to do, even if it's against its own people. They're going to do it.
Yeah, and I don't hold the individual law enforcement and military individuals account for that. They have orders to follow, and it would be treasonous for them not to do so. But I hold our leaders at fault if they allow situations to get to those levels, or they decide to take an action that's unnecessary. This should be the last resort, not the first thing that they go for.
Agreed.
All right. Well, I tell you what, it's time for one more break. We're going to come back, wrap all this up, and talk about what else is going on in the industry right here on TNCRadio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business.
Trucking Moves America Forward, or TMAF, is boosting the image of the industry by telling the story of trucking, and your story can be part of it. Upload a photo. Tell us what you love about trucking, or send us a story about a good deed or charitable act in trucking. Be sure to follow us on social media and contact us through truckingmovesamerica.com. That's truckingmovesamerica.com.
I'm Hope Savara, your host of the Driver Life Podcast, every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern on TNCRadio.live.
Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry, our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of, and join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Thanks, Ron. We're back in. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly, along with Jamie Irvin.
Hello.
And along with James Rogers.
How you doing? How you doing?
And we're back here, guys. It's time to wrap up. And so let's talk about the takeaways. We've talked about a lot of different things tonight. And there's a lot going on. So let me start with, I'm going to start with you, Jamie. Out of everything we've talked about, if you were sitting in the cab with somebody who's listening to this right now, what would you want to point out based on the conversation we've had tonight?
Well, you can't always, not always, you can't control what's going on in the world, and sometimes, even stuff going on in our own country, it's out of our control. So as a business owner, you have to be very proactive. And there are certain things that you can control, right? Within your own business, the way that you conduct yourself, the way that you go to the market. And you need to be proactive to protect yourself. I also think as a Canadian my countrymen have a long history of being more interested in American politics than we are in our own. We have seen the impact of being complacent about being involved in letting our representatives know what we need as constituents. And so if you're going to be a business owner, you need to be proactive. You need to get involved. You need to make your voice heard, and you need to focus on the things that you can control while keeping an eye on the larger picture. Largely, these are things you can't control, but they're still going to have an impact on you. So as a business owner, it's your responsibility to do that. And I think that both James and you, Tom, will be able to give us some specifics on how that can be done from the things that are going on in today's news cycle. But I just think that proactive approach is just absolutely critical as a business owner.
Oh, absolutely. I know for me with my business, getting down into the weeds of it, is if you are a fleet owner or you want to be one of the lessons learned from that is what we see going on is you have to constantly evaluate your company. And the key word I'm going to use is compliance. Compliance is just not a safety thing. You got to look at state laws. You got to look at federal laws. You got to look at labor laws. You got to see where you're at financially. You don't want to over leverage, and you want to prepare for that win moment. Like we talked about earlier in the show, it's not if, it's when. There's always going to be that win moment. And in order to best prepare for that is constantly, whether it's once a month, once a quarter, yearly, sit down with the powers that be, that, your CPA, your accountant, if you have a staff, sit down with your staff, or even if you're just a one-person operation, sit down and literally go through everything with a fine-tooth comb and say, am I in compliance? And have I set a foundation when that win moment comes that I am protected? And it's not something you want to sit on your heels about. When something new comes out, get ahead of the game. Get ahead of the game. The further ahead of the game or in the race that you are, the better off you're going to be, because it makes it easier to adapt and adjust to the changes rather than be reactionary.
One of the things that I've learned, and I mentioned this briefly earlier in my personal experience with Enron, as a business, it's very exciting to get the big contract. That's a fun thing, and it's like, woohoo! We've got a great client, but you have to be careful. You're not sitting in their boardroom. You're not sitting with the CEO. You're not sitting with the president. Always. I hate to say it this way because, again, I am an optimist. Doesn't sound like it tonight, but I am. But you're going to have to assume that they may not be quite as sharp in their business practices as you are with yours. And so you have to guard against the temptation to say, well, we know we really want to do business with these guys, so we're okay. We're okay if we get in, we said net 30, but we're going to let them go this month and have a little bit less. We're going to give them a little more time. Now it's net 90. Now it's net 180, and you still haven't been paid. You can't even if it means losing the client. Yeah, even if it means losing the client, sometimes you have to do what's best for your business. You can't let yourself get too hung up on somebody else. You just can't.
Well, And Tom, a big reason why a lot of people want to move from being like a driver to running a fleet is they want to be a business owner. They don't want to just be reliant on one company. You look at all the employees at Land Air who just got laid off, over 450. That's their one source of income. Boom, it's gone just like that. So now when you become a business owner, you don't want to put yourself in the position where you're in the exact same boat where you just have one big client, and if they go, you're in trouble. So it's one of the biggest assets of owning a small business is that you can work for 5, 10, 15 different organizations, and you can mitigate your risk. If you have 10 clients and they're all roughly the same size, you lose one, you know what? You're okay. You still got 90% of your business intact. So that's one thing I totally agree with you. And I think it's very, very important that people don't take an employee mindset into their new business that they're setting up.
Yeah, titles. I mean, I speak about this on my own show a lot. Is that's one thing you can definitely take away from this is don't get hung up on the titles. So many people in the trucking industry get hung up on the title. I'm an owner operator. I'm a lease operator. I'm only a company driver, or I'm a one-man fleet. This isn't going to affect me. To me, that's no. Get outside of your ego and understand what you truly are is a business owner. And you just said you spoke the truth right there.
So speaking of your show, James, let's just for those who maybe are listening for the first time, what is your show and where's the best place to find it?
I have a show on currently on YouTube. It's in the process of getting set up to move over to a actual podcast platform. The show is called the Road Rage Podcast. You can look it up on YouTube.
All right. What did you recently talk about? What was your last episode?
My last episode, I really, really went into the weeds about AB5. I had about a 2 or 3 show series where I broke it down from the initial concern of the first 3 rules all the way through the exemptions. And then recently, actually had a commenter from a comment talking about control. So I went into, okay, how does California define control? And we actually went through the complete IRS 20-step process to determine control, because that's what California, just like Missouri, uses to define control in relationship between an employee and a contractor.
All right. So head over to YouTube and just type in Road Rage Podcast. You'll find James Rogers and look for a upcoming podcast link where you'll be able to use your favorite podcast app to get access to that show. If you want to listen to the Heavy Duty Parts Report, that's my show. It is wherever you get your podcast, or you can just head over to heavydutypartsreport.com and follow for free. On Monday, we dropped an episode, The 3 Myths About Diesel Emission Systems. We debunk 3 myths. That was a really great episode. And on Friday, July 29th, I'm really excited to drop an episode that we're going to talk about how one company is helping drivers and repair technicians go from a diagnostic trouble code all the way to the replacement part in just 3 minutes or less. So there's some really powerful technology that's being produced by Diesel Laptops, and it is available for free to anybody who wants to get access to it and try it out. So that is an exciting episode, Tom. And that comes out on July 29th. That'll be on Friday.
Yeah. And, maybe you're not really good at managing through podcast and all that kind of stuff. If you're a fan of TNCradio.live, we do replay all of the Heavy Duty Parts Reports podcast. Now they're kind of random, not necessarily in order, but every morning at 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern, you can hear the Heavy Duty Parts Reports and hear what Jamie's up to. And through there, you also hear about how you can get in and find the podcast and listen to them the way you want to. But it's really easy to listen in and hear what Jamie's up to and what they've been doing. Also, throughout the rest of the week, of course, we have programming 24 hours a day, whether you want to hear about sports or one of our great new shows, guys, is called The Southern Route with Shannon Currier. We all know who Shannon Currier is, and she does a fantastic show just talking about living in the southern United States. We have other shows that are about the supply chain. We got shows that are about the history of music. You name it, you can find it right here on TNCradio.live. And of course, overnight is Steve Summers' Overnight drive. So you don't want to miss that. That's on, it starts on Sunday nights, Monday morning, depending on how you want to look at that. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So keep up with what's going on with all the other drivers who are out there too. It's a fantastic lineup, and I hope and hey, look, always looking for input. So drop us a note at info@tncradio.live. Happy to take your input. Hey, Tom, we want more of this. We want less of that. I'm always looking for your input. You've been listening to tncradio.live's Mind Your Trucking Business. Stay tuned next for Reverse Gear with Ron Samuels.
Do you have the tncradio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the tncradio.live app today.
Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for tncradio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.